The Arizona sun hammered down on Samuel Winchester's ranch like the fist of an angry god, turning the red earth to powder and the air to shimmering waves of heat. Sam stood at his fence line, weathered hands gripping the rough cedar posts he'd cut, and placed himself watching the horizon, where the mesas rose like ancient tombstones against the bleached sky. At 37, Sam had carved out his existence in this unforgiving land through sheer stubbornness and an intimate knowledge of where water could be found. His spread sat in a valley between two ridgelines blessed with a spring that ran year-round, a miracle in this country where men had killed for less. The nearest town, Redemption, lay 3 days' hard ride to the east, and Sam hadn't made that journey in over 6 months. The morning had started like any other. He'd risen before dawn, checked his small herd of cattle, mended a section of fence damaged by last week's dust storm, and was preparing to work on expanding his water trough when movement caught his eye. It was wrong, all wrong, for this time of day, when even the lizards sought shade. A small figure wavered in the heat mirage, moving in stuttering steps toward his property. Sam squinted, shading his eyes with one calloused hand. The figure stumbled, caught itself, stumbled again. It was small, too small to be a man, too upright to be an animal. A child? Sam muttered the word strange on his tongue after days of silence. He set down his tools with deliberate care, a hammer, fence wire, leather gloves worn thin from use, and began walking toward the approaching figure. His boot steps crunched on the hardpan, each footfall raising small puffs of dust that hung in the still air. As he drew closer, details emerged that made his stomach tighten with unease. It was indeed a child, a girl, by the look of her. Couldn't be more than 10 or 11 summers. Her clothes, traditional Apache garments of soft leather and woven cloth, hung in tatters. The decorative beadwork that should have caught the morning light was dulled with dust and what might have been dried blood. Her face, when she finally lifted it to look at him, was gaunt with hunger, her dark eyes too large, like a doe that had been run too hard for too long. Sam stopped 20 feet away, hands visible at his sides. He knew enough about the Apache to understand that approaching too quickly could be seen as aggression, and this child was already frightened enough. Her lips moved, cracked and bleeding, forming words in her native tongue that he couldn't understand. But the gesture that followed, hand to mouth, then pointing to his water trough, needed no translation. "Water," Sam said softly, nodding. "Water and food, yes." The girl took another step and her legs gave out entirely. She collapsed to her knees in the dust, swaying like a sapling in a storm. Sam covered the remaining distance in 3 quick strides and knelt beside her. This close, he could see the rope burns on her thin wrists, the bruises on her arms that spoke of rough handling. His jaw tightened. Most men in these parts would have already reached for their rifles. The Apache and the settlers had been at each other's throats for years, raid following raid, in an endless cycle of vengeance. Just last month, the Hendricks spread had been burned out, though whether by Apache or by white men claiming it was Apache was anybody's guess. Fear and hatred ran deep as the canyon walls out here, but Sam had never been most men. Maybe it was the year he'd spent living with Mexican traders as a younger man, learning that people were people regardless of the color of their skin. Maybe it was the simple fact that he'd seen enough suffering in his life to recognize it when it stood before him. Or maybe it was just that turning away a starving child went against every principle his mother had beaten into him with a wooden spoon and Presbyterian determination. He scooped the girl up, gently, shocked at how little she weighed. Bird bones and determination, nothing more. She didn't fight him, too weak for struggle, though he felt her body tense with fear. "Easy now," he murmured, the same tone he used with spooked horses. "Nobody's going to hurt you here." The walk to his cabin seemed longer than usual. He was acutely aware of the child's labored breathing, the way her head lolled against his shoulder. The morning sun climbed higher, promising another day of brutal heat. Sweat beaded on his forehead, whether from exertion or worry, he couldn't say. His cabin squatted low against the earth, built of adobe and timber, designed to weather the storms that rolled through the valley in late summer. It wasn't much. One main room with a sleeping alcove, a stone fireplace for the cold desert night's furniture he'd built himself from whatever wood he could scavenge. But it was solid, and it was his. Inside, he laid the girl carefully on his one good chair, the one his father had made back in Missouri before the war changed everything. She slumped back, eyes fluttering, and for a moment, Sam feared she might pass out entirely. He moved quickly to the stove where a pot of beans had been simmering since dawn, ladled some into a bowl, and tore off a chunk of the bread he'd baked 2 days ago. The smell of food seemed to revive her slightly, her eyes focused on the bowl with an intensity that spoke of days without eating. When Sam handed it to her, she grabbed it with shaking hands and began eating with desperate efficiency, barely pausing to breathe between bites. "Slow down," Sam said gently. "It's not going anywhere." As she ate, he finally noticed what hung around her neck. The beadwork was intricate patterns of red, white, and black, forming symbols he didn't understand but recognized as important. The leather was soft and well-worked, the kind of craft that took years to master. But it was the centerpiece that made his blood run cold, a silver concho hammered and etched with distinctive markings. Ezra Holloway, his nearest neighbor to the north, had described exactly such a piece to him not 2 weeks ago. It was the mark of Chief Red Sky's family, worn only by his closest kin. Red Sky, who commanded the loyalty of 200 warriors. Red Sky, who had been making the U.S. cavalry look like amateur soldiers for the better part of 5 years. Sam's hand froze halfway to offering the girl more water. If this child was who he thought she was, he wasn't just harboring any Apache child. He was holding the daughter of the most powerful war chief in the territory. A man who could ride down on this ranch with enough warriors to turn it into a smoking ruin before the sun set. But the girl was reaching for the water with those terrible thin hands, and Sam couldn't bring himself to care about the consequences. Not yet. He gave her the cup and watched her drink water running down her chin in her haste. What he didn't know was that 15 miles to the west, a search party of Apache warriors had just found the girl's trail, and riding at their head, his face a mask of controlled fury that promised death to anyone who had harmed his daughter, was Chief Red Sky himself. The girl finished eating and looked up at Sam with eyes that held too much knowledge for one so young. She spoke again in Apache, longer sentences this time, gesturing toward the door and then at herself. Sam caught a word that sounded like danger, another that might have been coming. "I don't understand," he said slowly, "but you're safe here." Safe. She shook her head frantically and grabbed his shirt, pulling him toward the window. Through the thick glass, a luxury that had cost him 2 months' profit from his cattle, Sam could see nothing but his empty ranch yard and the heat waves rising from the packed earth. But the girl's fear was real and growing by the second. Then he heard it, so faint it might have been imagination, but his years in this hard country had taught him to trust his instincts. The rhythmic pounding of hooves on hard ground, many hooves moving fast and with purpose. Someone was coming, and by the girl's reaction, Sam had a feeling his quiet life was about to become very complicated indeed. The hoofbeats grew louder, resolving from a distant rumble into the distinct sound of multiple riders approaching fast. Sam peered through the window, trying to count the dust plumes rising in the distance. Too many to be a regular search party. This was something bigger. The girl tugged at his sleeve again, speaking rapidly in Apache. She pointed to herself, made a cutting motion across her throat, then pointed at Sam and repeated the gesture. The message was clear danger for both of them. Sam's mind raced through his options. His ranch sat in a valley with only two ways in or out, both of which could be easily watched. Running was impossible, especially with a child who could barely stand. Fighting was suicide. He had plenty of ammunition, but not enough to hold off what looked like a war party. "Hide," he said suddenly, remembering the root cellar he'd dug beneath the cabin floor. It was meant for storing preserves and potatoes through the winter, but it might serve a different purpose now. He pulled back the worn rug that covered the trapdoor and lifted the heavy wooden hatch. The cellar was deep and cool, lined with stone, to keep out the worst of the desert heat. There was room enough for the girl, barely, but she shook her head violently when he gestured for her to climb down. Instead, she pointed to herself, then outside, then made walking motions with her fingers. She wanted to go to them. "No," Sam said firmly. "You're in no condition to—" The first riders crested the ridge overlooking his property, and Sam's words died in his throat. They came in perfect formation, spreading out in a wide arc that would surround his cabin within minutes. Even at this distance, he could see the weapons they carried, the war paint on their faces and horses. These weren't scouts or hunters. This was a war party in full strength. A sharp knock rattled his door, making both Sam and the girl jump. But the voice that called out wasn't Apache. It was familiar, though unwelcome. Sam Winchester, you in there?" "It's Josiah Brennan. Open up, man. We got trouble coming." Sam recognized the voice of his neighbor from the ranch, 5 miles south. With a last glance at the approaching riders, he moved to the door and opened it, enough to see Josiah's flushed face, along with 2 other men he recognized, Deputy Marshal Tom Harrington from Redemption and Father Benedict, the circuit priest who came through every few months. "What the hell are you doing here?" Sam asked, though he suspected he already knew. Josiah pushed past him into the cabin, the others following. Tom's father sent word from town. Chief Red Sky's daughter went missing 4 days ago during a gathering. They say she wandered off during a storm. Josiah's eyes swept the cabin and landed on the girl, who had shrunk back against the wall. "Jesus Christ, Sam. Tell me that's not her." Tom Harrington stepped forward, his hand moving instinctively to his sidearm. "Mr. Winchester, I'm going to need you to step away from that child. If she's who I think she is, she's a hungry kid who showed up at my door half dead." Sam interrupted. "I gave her food and water." "Since when is that a crime?" "Since it might get us all killed," Father Benedict said quietly. The priest was normally a man of few words and fewer judgments, but his face was pale with fear. "Sam, do you have any idea what Red Sky will do if he thinks you've taken his daughter?" "I didn't take anyone," Sam snapped. "She came here on her own, starving and scared. What was I supposed to do, let her die?" "Yes," Josiah exploded. "That's exactly what you should have done, for God's sake, man. Use your head. Red Skies killed men for looking at him wrong. What do you think he'll do to someone he believes kidnapped his only daughter?" Through the window, Sam could see the Apache warriors had completed their circle around his property. They sat motionless on their horses, waiting. The sight of 200 armed warriors in absolute silence was more terrifying than any amount of war cries would have been. "I have to report this," Tom said, already backing toward the door. "It's my duty to warn the town. If Red Sky decides to make an example here, he might not stop with just your ranch." "You're running?" Sam asked, disgust creeping into his voice. "I'm doing my job," Tom shot back, "which includes protecting the innocent folks in Redemption who didn't choose to harbor Apache children." He looked at the girl once more, and Sam saw something like pity flash across his face. "God help you, Sam, both of you." The 3 men left as quickly as they'd come, spurring their horses hard toward town. Sam watched them go with a sinking feeling in his gut. He was alone now with a sick child and 200 warriors waiting to see what he would do. The girl spoke again, stronger now that the food had given her some energy. She moved to the window and pointed at one of the riders, a massive figure on a black horse who sat slightly forward of the others. Even at this distance, Sam could feel the weight of authority that surrounded the man like armor. Red Sky. Sam said not a question. The girl nodded, then did something that surprised him. She smiled just slightly, but it transformed her thin face. She pointed to the chief, then to herself, then made a gesture that Sam interpreted as father. He's your father, another nod. And you want to go to him. This time she shook her head. She pointed to Sam, then to herself, then to her father, and finally made a gesture that encompassed all three of them together. You want me to come with you? Sam asked, incredulous. The girl nodded emphatically. She grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the door with surprising strength. Her meaning was clear. They would face this together. A voice called out from the ring of warriors, speaking in accented but clear English. White man, we know you have taken what belongs to us. Send out the girl, and perhaps you will see another sunrise. The voice carried absolute authority. This was Red Sky himself, and he wasn't interested in negotiations. Sam felt the girl's hand tighten on his. She was trembling, but not, he realized, from fear of her father. She was afraid for him. This child who had suffered God knows what over the past 4 days was worried about a stranger who had shown her kindness. What will happen if I go out there? Sam asked her, even though he knew she couldn't understand. But perhaps she did understand, because she made that throat-cutting gesture again, then shook her head violently. Then she pointed to herself, mimed talking, and pointed to her father. She would speak for him. Sam almost laughed at the absurdity of it. His life hanging on the word of a 10-year-old girl who he'd known for less than 2 hours. But what choice did he have? Die fighting in his cabin, or die taking a chance on a child's ability to save him? Through the window he saw movement among the warriors. Bows were being strung, rifles checked. Red Sky's patience was wearing thin. The war drums started, then a slow, measured beat that seemed to come from the earth itself. The sound raised the hair on Sam's neck and sent ice through his veins. This wasn't random violence or a raiding party's chaos. This was organized, deliberate, and absolutely terrifying. The girl pulled at his hand again, more urgently now. She kept pointing to the door and speaking in rapid Apache, her voice rising with desperation. Whatever window of opportunity existed was closing fast. Sam made his decision. He checked his rifle, a Winchester 73 that had served him well for years, and made sure his Colt was loaded. Not that either weapon would do much good against 200 warriors, but a man liked to have options. All right, he said to the girl, we do this together. He reached for the door handle, his hand steady, despite the fear coursing through him. In the moment before he opened it, he caught sight of his reflection in the small mirror by the entrance. The face looking back at him was that of a man about to gamble everything on the word of a child. The door swung open and Sam stepped out into the blazing sun, the Apache girl's hand still clasped in his. 200 warriors shifted as one, every weapon turning to focus on him, and there, sitting his horse like death itself, was Chief Red Sky. The chief was everything the stories had said and more. Tall and broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his long black hair, he radiated power like heat from a forge. His face was painted for war, black and red designs that made his dark eyes seem to burn with inner fire. When those eyes found his daughter, something flickered across his features, relief, joy, or rage. Sam couldn't tell. The girl ran toward her father, calling out in Apache. But instead of the reunion Sam expected, Red Sky's expression grew darker. He dismounted in one fluid motion and knelt beside his daughter, examining her carefully while she spoke in rapid, animated bursts. Sam stood frozen on his porch, acutely aware of 200 pairs of eyes, watching his every move. The rifle in his hands felt both useless and necessary, like a child's toy in the face of an avalanche. Red Sky rose slowly and began walking toward Sam. Each step was measured deliberate, the walk of a man who had never backed down from anything in his life. The other warriors remained mounted but shifted their weapons slightly, a rattlesnake's warning before the strike. "My daughter tells me you fed her," Red Sky said when he stopped just outside arm's reach. His English was precise, educated. "She tells me you gave her shelter." "She was starving," Sam replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "I couldn't let a child die." Red Sky studied him for a long moment. "She also tells me you saw the mark of our family around her neck. You knew who she was, yet you did not seek to return her immediately." This was it, the accusation that would justify whatever violence followed. Sam felt sweat running down his back despite the desert heat. "I was going to bring her back come morning," he said. "She was too weak to travel." "Perhaps," Red Sky said, "or perhaps you thought to trade her back to us for gold or cattle or safe passage through our lands. White men have done worse for less." One of the warriors, younger than the others with fresh scars across his chest, suddenly urged his horse forward. He spoke harshly in Apache, gesturing violently toward Sam. Red Sky responded in the same language, his tone sharp with authority, but the young warrior wasn't backing down. The girl suddenly stepped between them, her young voice cutting through the tension. She spoke passionately, gesturing back at Sam and then at her father. Whatever she said made the young warrior's face cycle through several emotions: anger, confusion, and finally something that might have been shame. Red Sky turned back to Sam. "My warrior Black Thunder says you should die for touching an Apache child. His brother was killed by white soldiers last moon, and his heart burns for vengeance." The chief's eyes bored into Sam's. "Tell me, white man, why should I deny him his blood justice?" Sam met Red Sky's gaze without flinching, though every instinct screamed at him to run. "Because your daughter came to me for help, and I gave it. Because turning away a starving child makes me no better than the soldiers who killed Black Thunder's brother." The words hung in the desert air like smoke from a signal fire. Black Thunder's scarred face twisted with rage, and he spoke again, louder this time. Other warriors began to murmur the sound, rippling through their ranks, like wind through dry grass. Red Sky raised his hand, and silence fell instantly. But Sam could see the calculation in the chief's eyes. This wasn't just about one white man and one Apache child anymore. This was about authority, about justice, about the delicate balance between old ways and new realities. "You speak of soldiers," Red Sky said slowly, "yet you live alone, far from other whites." Why, it was a test, Sam realized. Red Sky already knew the answer. A man didn't survive as a war chief without excellent intelligence. But he wanted to hear Sam say it. "I wanted no part of their wars," Sam admitted. "I came here for peace, to live without taking from others or having others take from me." "Yet you took my daughter." "I gave her shelter," Sam corrected, feeling anger creep into his voice despite the danger. "There's a difference." Black Thunder dismounted suddenly, his hand going to the knife at his belt. He spoke directly to Red Sky, and this time Sam caught enough words to understand the gist. The warrior was challenging his chief's hesitation, questioning whether Red Sky had grown soft. The girl, Sam realized he still didn't know her name, stepped forward again. But this time she didn't speak to the men. Instead, she walked to Black Thunder's horse and placed her small hand on its neck. The animal, trained for war and likely to bite strangers, stood perfectly still. She began to speak, her young voice carrying clearly in the morning air. As she talked, she pointed to various warriors in the circle, naming them. Sam didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. She was telling a story, and every man there was listening. Red Sky translated quietly, his eyes never leaving his daughter. "She says she knows Black Thunder's pain. She says she was there when his brother fell fighting bravely against 10 soldiers. She says his brother's name was White Eagle, and he died protecting the women and children during the retreat from Skeleton Canyon. Black Thunder's knife hand trembled. The girl continued speaking, her voice growing stronger. She says White Eagle would not want his death repaid with the blood of a man who showed mercy. She says the white soldiers who killed him gave no quarter, showed no kindness, but this man. Red Sky gestured toward Sam. This man saw only a hungry child and acted with honor. The girl walked back to Sam and took his hand again. The gesture sent another ripple through the watching warriors. She spoke directly to Black Thunder now, and her words made the scarred warrior take a step back. She asks him what he would want a stranger to do if his own child was lost and starving. She asks if he would want that stranger to show mercy or cruelty. Black Thunder's response was barely a whisper, but it carried. Red Sky's translation came slowly. He says perhaps the spirit sent his brother's killer a different lesson than the one he expected. The girl wasn't finished. She raised her voice, addressing all the warriors now. Sam watched their faces change as she spoke, hard expressions softening incrementally. Whatever she was saying, it was having an effect. "My daughter shames us," Red Sky said, and there was something like wonder in his voice. "She says we claim the white man has no honor yet. Here stands one who risked his life for an Apache child. She says if we kill him for showing mercy, we become the monsters they say we are." The silence that followed was absolute. 200 of the finest warriors in the territory sat motionless, considering the words of a 10-year-old girl. Sam felt the moment balanced on a knife's edge. It could tip either way. Finally, Red Sky spoke. "There is a way to settle this with honor, but it will require courage from you, white man. More courage than facing our arrows." "Name it," Sam said without hesitation. "You will come with us to our camp. You will stand before the council of elders and answer for your actions. If they judge you spoke truth, you live. If they believe you meant harm." Red Sky didn't need to finish. Sam looked down at the girl, still holding his hand. She nodded encouragingly, squeezing his fingers. "Trust me," the gesture said. "What about my ranch?" Sam asked. It was a practical concern. Leave the place unattended too long, and he'd lose everything he'd built. "Your property will be protected," Red Sky said. "I give my word, no Apache will touch it." A chief's word was law. Sam had learned that much in his years on the frontier, but riding into an Apache camp as a prisoner, or whatever he would be, was another matter entirely. Few white men had done it and lived to tell the tale. "I'll need to gather some things," Sam said. Red Sky shook his head. "You come now or not at all." This was it, the moment of decision. Sam could refuse die here on his own land and become another cautionary tale told in redemption saloons. Or he could trust a child's ability to speak for him and possibly find something he hadn't even known he was looking for, a way to bridge two worlds that seemed destined for eternal conflict. He set his rifle carefully against the porch rail. Then he unbuckled his gun belt and hung it on the post. The gestures were deliberate, visible to all. "I choose trust over fear." "I'm ready," he said. Red Sky nodded, once approval flickering across his features. He spoke to his warriors in Apache, and Sam caught the tone, if not the words. Explanation, command, and warning all rolled into one. Black Thunder was the last to lower his weapon, but he did lower it. A horse was brought forward, a sturdy paint that looked like it could run all day without tiring. Sam mounted carefully, aware that every movement was being watched and judged. The girl scrambled up behind her father on his black stallion, and Sam noted how gently the feared war chief helped her, how his hands checked her for injuries even as he tried to appear unconcerned. The ride to the Apache camp took them through country Sam had never seen, hidden valleys, secret passes, trails that seemed to disappear and reappear like magic. The warriors rode in formation around him, not quite guards, not quite escorts. He wasn't bound, but he understood that running would be both futile and fatal. As they traveled, the girl kept turning to look at him, offering small smiles of encouragement. Once, when they stopped to water the horses at a hidden spring, she brought him water in a gourd. The simple gesture of kindness from the child he'd helped made his throat tight with emotion. The camp appeared suddenly as they crested a ridge. Dozens of wickiups arranged in careful patterns, smoke rising from cooking fires, the sound of daily life carrying on the wind. Women and children emerged to watch their approach, and Sam could feel the weight of their stares. The council convened as the sun reached its zenith. 7 elders sat in a semicircle, their faces mapped with years of survival in this harsh land. At their center sat a man so old his hair was white as bone, his eyes milky with age but somehow still sharp as obsidian. Red Sky spoke first, laying out the facts without emotion. Then Black Thunder had his say, his voice still carrying traces of anger, but tempered now with uncertainty. Other warriors spoke, some arguing for traditional justice, others seeming less certain. Finally, the girl stepped forward. She stood in the center of the circle, small but unafraid, and began to speak. Her voice started soft, but grew stronger with each word. She gestured as she talked to Sam, to her father, to the elders, painting pictures with her hands that transcended language. Sam didn't need translation to understand what was happening. She was telling his story, but more than that, she was telling their story. The story of 2 peoples who had forgotten how to see each other as human. The story of how a simple act of kindness could echo louder than any war cry. When she finished, the silence was profound. The ancient elder spoke, his voice like wind through ancient stones. The other elders conferred in whispers that seemed to go on forever, while Sam's fate hung in the balance. Finally, Red Sky turned to him with translation. The council has reached a decision. They say the spirits have sent us a test, not of our strength in war, but our wisdom in peace. You showed mercy to our daughter when you could have shown cruelty. The council grants you not just your life, but something more. The old elder spoke again, gesturing with one gnarled hand. You will be given the protection of our people. Any Apache who harms you or your property will answer to this council. But there is a condition: if any of our people come to you in need, you must show them the same kindness you showed this child. I accept, Sam said without hesitation. What happened next surprised everyone, including Red Sky. The girl ran to Sam and threw her arms around him, speaking in broken English for the first time. Thank you for saving me. Now I save you too. As the council dispersed and preparations were made for Sam's return to his ranch, he found himself standing beside Red Sky. The chief studied him with those penetrating eyes. You know this changes things, Red Sky said quietly. Your people will not understand. You may find yourself unwelcome among them. They weren't exactly welcoming before, Sam replied. At least now I know why I'm out here. Red Sky nodded slowly. Perhaps the spirits knew what they were doing when they sent my daughter to your door. Perhaps they saw what we could not, that the answer to this endless war is not more war, but simple human kindness. Perhaps, Sam agreed. Then, because he had to know, what's her name, your daughter? For the first time since they'd met, Red Sky smiled. It transformed his face from warrior to father. Morning Star, it means the light that guides travelers home. Sam looked at the girl. Morning Star, who was now playing with other children, her ordeal already fading into memory, as children's troubles do. It suits her. The journey back to Sam's ranch took place as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. This time he rode with an honor guard rather than as a prisoner. 12 warriors chosen by Red Sky himself, with Morning Star riding alongside on her own pony. The difference in the child from that morning was remarkable. Fed, rested, and reunited with her people. She chattered constantly in a mix of Apache and broken English, translating her own words when Sam looked confused. "She says you have good horses," Black Thunder translated. The scarred warrior had volunteered to ride with them, a gesture Sam understood as a form of apology. "But they need better grass. She knows a valley 2 days north where the grass grows tall, even in dry seasons." "Tell her I'm grateful for the advice," Sam said, still adjusting to the surreal nature of receiving ranching tips from a 10-year-old Apache girl. As they approached his property, Sam saw riders waiting near his cabin. His heart sank as he recognized Josiah Brennan and several other ranchers from the area, all armed. They'd formed a defensive line, probably thinking they were protecting the ranch from Apache raiders. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Sam," Josiah called out as they drew closer. "Thank God you're—" His words died as he took in the full scene, Sam riding freely among Apache warriors, Morning Star at his side, clearly unharmed and unhurried. "What in the name of all that's holy is going on here?" demanded Carl Hutchins, whose ranch bordered Sam's to the south. His hand rested on his pistol knuckles, white with tension. Sam raised his hand in a calming gesture. "It's all right, Carl. These men are my guests." "Guests?" Josiah's voice cracked with disbelief. "Sam, have you lost your mind? These are Apache." "I'm aware," Sam said dryly. He dismounted slowly, making no sudden movements. The Apache warriors remained mounted, watchful but not threatening. "And they're here under a banner of peace." "Peace," Carl spat the word like it tasted sour. "Tell that to the Hendricks family." Black Thunder understood enough English to tense at the mention. Sam saw his hand move toward his weapon and quickly intervened. "The Hendricks fire was started by lightning," he said firmly. "Tom Harrington investigated it himself, unless you're calling the deputy marshal a liar." That gave Carl pause. The other ranchers exchanged uncertain looks. They'd come expecting a fight or a funeral, not this strange tableau of cooperation. Morning Star chose that moment to slide down from her pony and walk directly to Josiah's horse. The animal, a notoriously bad-tempered stallion, lowered his head and let her stroke his nose. She looked up at Josiah with those large, dark eyes and said in careful English, "Thank you for worry about Sam. He is good man." Josiah's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. She speaks English." "Learning," Morning Star said proudly. "Sam teach more, yes." She looked back at Sam, hopefully. "If your father allows it," Sam said, fighting a smile at the way she'd just diplomatically destroyed any chance of violence. Hard to shoot at people when a little girl was standing between the groups, petting horses and making future plans. Red Sky had been right, this would change things. Sam could see it in the faces of his neighbors' confusion, replacing hostility as they tried to reconcile their preconceptions with the reality before them. "You'd best head home," Sam told them quietly. "Sun's getting low and your families will worry." Carl looked like he wanted to argue, but Josiah was already turning his horse. "We'll talk about this later, Sam," he said, his tone suggesting that conversation would involve a lot of shouting. After the ranchers left, the Apache warriors helped Sam tend to his evening chores. It was surreal watching feared raiders calmly filling water troughs and checking fence lines, but they worked with quiet efficiency. Morning Star supervised everything with the self-importance of a child who'd appointed herself forewoman. As darkness approached, the warriors prepared to leave. Black Thunder approached Sam, his English careful but clear. "You keep promise. Help Apache who need help. We keep promise. Protect your land." "I understand," Sam said. The warrior hesitated, then added, "My brother, White Eagle." He had daughter same age as Morning Star. When he died, I swore vengeance on all whites. He looked toward where Morning Star was saying elaborate goodbyes to Sam's horses. But Child is right. Vengeance not bring him back. Maybe peace better legacy. Before Sam could respond, Black Thunder mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Sam to ponder the weight of what had just been shared. Morning Star was the last to leave. She hugged Sam tightly, chattering rapidly in Apache before remembering to translate. I come back, bring others. You teach English, I teach Apache. We make bridge, yes. Yes, Sam agreed, his throat tight. We make bridge. Red Sky, who had been silent through most of the evening, spoke as he helped his daughter onto her pony. This will not be easy. My people have many reasons to distrust whites. Your people have many reasons to fear Apache. Old wounds do not heal quickly. But they do heal, Sam said, if we let them. The chief nodded slowly. We shall see. The council will spread word of what happened here. Any Apache in need may come to you. In return, your safety is guaranteed among our people. He paused, studying Sam with those penetrating eyes. You may find this brings you more trouble than you expect. I've been running from trouble for 3 years, Sam admitted. Maybe it's time I stopped running. After they left, Sam stood in his empty yard listening to the sound of hoofbeats fading into the desert night. His life of carefully maintained solitude was over, he realized. Word would spread was probably already spreading about the strange events at the Winchester Ranch. Over the following weeks, that prediction proved accurate. Some neighbors stopped speaking to him entirely, viewing his actions as a betrayal of his own kind. Others came by with cautious questions, trying to understand what had possessed him to risk everything for an Apache child. But other visitors came too. An old Apache woman with an infected wound, seeking help when the traditional remedies failed. Sam's basic medical knowledge learned from his mother was enough to clean and bandage the injury. She left him a beautifully woven blanket in thanks. A young Apache hunter injured in a fall who needed shelter while his broken leg healed. Sam splinted the limb and shared his food for the 3 days it took the young man's friends to find him. And Morning Star, who came every few weeks with different companions, always eager to practice her English and teach Apache words in return. She brought children her own age, and gradually Sam's ranch became a place where the young of both cultures could meet on neutral ground. The transformation wasn't without conflict. When word reached Redemption that Sam was regularly hosting Apache visitors, a delegation of town leaders rode out to confront him. They spoke of safety, of property values, of the natural order of things. Sam listened patiently, then asked a simple question. In the 6 months since this started, how many raids have there been on ranches under Apache protection? The silence was answer enough. The raids had all but stopped in their area, the Apache honoring Red Sky's agreement with scrupulous care. One evening, almost a year after that fateful morning, Sam sat on his porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Morning Star sat beside him, reading aloud from a book of children's stories he'd bought on his last trip to town. Her English was much improved, though she still stumbled over longer words. "Why you live alone before?" she asked suddenly, setting the book aside. Sam had been dreading this question, but he'd promised himself he'd answer honestly when it came. "I was married once. My wife died. After that, I couldn't bear to be around people anymore. Too many memories." Morning Star considered this with the gravity children brought to serious matters. "Sadness like empty belly," she said finally, "hurts more when nothing fill it up." The simple wisdom of it made Sam's eyes burn. "That's true. Not empty now," she observed, gesturing toward the small garden he'd started. With seeds Black Thunder had brought the additional horses in his expanded corral. the new room he was adding to his cabin for the increasing number of overnight visitors. Full of new things. Yes, Sam agreed. Full of new things. As if to emphasize her point, riders appeared on the horizon. Sam recognized the lead figure as Thomas Brennan Josiah's son, accompanied by his young wife and another couple Sam didn't know. They'd sent word they were coming, curious about the language exchange Morning Star had been talking about in town. "Friends come," Morning Star said, happily jumping up to greet them. Sam rose too, marveling at the changes a year had brought. His ranch had become what he'd never intended, but perhaps always needed a place where worlds met, where understanding grew slowly but surely, like desert flowers after rain. The bridge Morning Star had spoken of was still fragile, still tested by old fears and new challenges. There were setbacks, a young warrior who refused to accept the new ways, a group of miners who tried to start trouble, but the foundation held. 5 years later, when Morning Star stood before a gathering of territorial officials as an official translator and mediator, Sam was there to witness it. The scared, starving child had become a young woman of remarkable strength and wisdom, equally at home in both worlds. "You started this," she told him afterward, "when you chose kindness over fear." "You started it," Sam corrected, "when you refused to let fear win." She smiled, the same smile that had convinced 200 warriors to spare a lonely rancher's life. "We started it together." Sam's ranch remained a neutral ground for the rest of his days. He never remarried, but he was never alone. His family became the steady stream of visitors, Apache and white alike, who came seeking the peace that could be found where two worlds met without violence. When he died at the age of 74, his funeral was attended by people from both cultures. Morning Star, now a grandmother herself, spoke at the service. She told the story of a starving child and a lonely man who chose to trust each other when everything said they shouldn't. "He taught us that bridges can be built from the simplest materials," she said. "Kindness, trust, and the courage to see each other as human beings first, everything else second." Sam Winchester was buried on a hill overlooking his ranch, his grave marked with a stone that bore inscriptions in both English and Apache. The ranch itself became a school run jointly by both communities, where children learned that the world was bigger than their fears. And in the end, that was Sam's greatest legacy. Not the land he'd claimed or the cattle he'd raised, but the proof that even the deepest divides could be crossed when people chose compassion over conflict. The bridge he and Morning Star built, with nothing more than shared humanity, stood long after both of them were gone, a testament to the power of one moment's kindness to change the course of history. The last entry in Sam's journal, found after his death, summed up his philosophy. "We make ourselves large through fear and small through love. I choose to be small enough to fit through the door of understanding." It became the motto of the school that bore his name carved above the entrance, where Apache and white children learned side by side, building new bridges with every passing day.